Classics is sponsored by WCBE 90.5 FM, Columbus, Ohio, and is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to shows online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Mindy Mcfann.
And this is Cinema Classics. Let me do that again. I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Mindy Mcfann.
And this is Cinema Classics.
Yes, it is.
Well, Mindy, I searched all over the world for just the right partner for our discussion of Blonde.
Yes.
And it's largely because I think you have a sense of the troubled mega movie star that Marilyn Monroe was, or at least, yes, I know you would, even though you're too young to have lived through her time.
Right.
I certainly lived through her time, and as an adolescent, she did represent something to me, mostly about sexuality.
Right.
I used to go by a store that had it kept in its window the iconic photo of her naked, with her arm up like this, and I'm just fascinated by it. Not only just because of prurient, but because there was something that drew me to her.
Right.
It was drawing me to women
Yes.
at the time that I was 12 or 13.
Yep.
So we have a movie called Blonde, and it's playing on Netflix, so it's available to everybody.
Yep. Yep.
Give me an overall.
Well, my take on it, and I've been yakking a lot about this, is it being Marilyn Monroe to me seemed almost irrelevant. She seemed just like a representative of a lot of things women live through. I mean, it is vaguely based on her life, but I think it's just based on the idea of a woman, I would like to say in the past, but I don't know that that's being honest, who grew up really rough, and what that manifests in you, and how how many men have fed off of that vulnerability throughout time, because they were in power. Not because each man is bad, but because the people in power oftentimes do really bad stuff.
Well, and you're so right. What in my imagination, this movie, which is written and directed by Andrew Dominic, what it emphasizes to me, perhaps maybe a bit too much, is the effect that her abusive childhood had on her life, and that dominated by men, an absent father.
Yes.
And I think of the 3 men that she married as circumscribing her life. Is that fair?
Yes, I don't think it's too much. I think many women have lived and do live this life.
Okay.
Where you are not the person in power, and so once you've been destroyed and abused, you are likely to invite that into your life. That is not to blame her or any other woman, even vaguely, but it is just what happens. You become broken, so it is harder to stand up for yourself, because that yearning for emotional connection and love and all those things that every human being feels. If you are a degraded population, I mean, especially, in her time, women couldn't even have their own credit cards. I mean, women were subjected to so much abuse. And what I was struck by is I started to think how little that is represented in film. I mean, we have The Handmaid's Tale, such a big brouhaha about that, but it's not real.
That's right.
It's not real, and it's how not often do we see the story of what women have gone through and continue to go through.
Sure. I
mean, we hear about Harvey Weinstein, and we hear about all these other predators that are out there, but so rarely do we see what it is like for a woman to be caught up in that system. Whether you're Marilyn Monroe or Sue Smith or whomever you are, this is what happened. This is really real stuff.
If you look at the contrast currently, if you take the woman king, and there's a woman who rises, a few centuries ago, rises with her warrior women to defend Africa, to defend their segment of Africa. And you look at that, it's almost the polar opposite of what happened to Marilyn.
Yeah.
These are women who snatched their power, took their power, took their place.
Right.
And the men, even though their enemies were disrupted by the fact that women were beating them, still, you're reminding me of the stark difference between women who are able to take control and women like Marilyn Monroe. I mean, Marilyn Monroe, as you were beginning to describe that, was exactly that to me, the visual symbol of sex, and of and of male dominance.
Well, I mean, I think any good-looking woman's gonna have that
Right.
crap to deal with. That is the curse of being good-looking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why I love getting old. I love turning that corner when I could be left alone walking down the street. I mean, the freedom of that, you don't realize what a trap it is until you're out of it.
That's right. Anna de Armas plays Marilyn Monroe. And as you were talking, I still can't quite describe why Monroe transcended almost every other woman in the world in the sense of her symbolic representation of women's sexuality. And I'm not sure anybody's able to define that charisma that she had.
Right.
That nobody else had, or at least that people spied.
Right.
You know, she left 75% of her estate to Lee Strasberg, the method actor, king, which indicated how important it was for her to learn that craft.
I think it was not only that, I think the Strasbergs were kind to her. I think they were familial to her.
Good
You know,
point.
Susan, I think, was kind of a
Very
sister
good.
lead figure. I mean, she had nobody.
Yeah.
It is really hard to get through life with an entire support system. It is almost impossible if you have nobody.
Now, I would have thought Arthur Miller, as one of her husbands, would
Right.
have been that.
I don't know. I don't know that when you are that depleted, it's how you pick a healthy person to have a relationship with. I mean, that's just, that would be very, very difficult.
She said, Arthur Miller would not have married me if I had been a dumb blonde. And there's a little moment where she parses one of his works and likens it to Chekhov, and to a character in Chekhov, and Miller is almost speechless. He said, "Who gave that to you?"
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe that this woman sitting in front of him was so smart as to do that.
Yeah, I still think that probably happens. I mean, I think that still probably happens where women are set aside because you don't know as much. I mean, mansplaining wouldn't exist but for that. This idea that just because you're female, you must be less intellectual. And if you are intellectual, you're pretty annoying. I mean, I have no doubt that she was incredibly bright and incredibly talented.
Yes.
All of those things to me are givens.
Yes.
It's just when you have an entire system set up against you and you've been horribly abused, I don't know, so few people get out of that. I mean, I think obviously I think she's a survivor because you learn what you bring to the table. When you've been horribly abused, I think you can find out, I'm smart, I'm good looking, I'm funny. You find attributes that are survivable, that make other people drawn to you. And it's part of her brilliance, or anybody that survives, they're able to access that.
Yeah. And one of the parts of the film that I enjoyed and was meaningful to me was explaining in some way why she was such a mess on the set, and particularly the 7-Year Itch, for instance, where it took almost 40 takes for her.
Right.
You know, what was wrong, or where she made people I know wait for hours till she got there.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing more clearly now as Dominic lets her show herself, is that her hang-ups, her sense of vulnerability, her uncertainty about her acting ability kept her from getting out there. And I said, okay. And then, how about the Kennedy episode?
Yeah, it doesn't really surprise me. I mean, that's how I imagine his life rolled. I mean,
yes.
And unfortunately, I would say, I don't know, 98% of the female population in this country has been in that situation.
Oh boy, there is.
That's just, that, I mean, those are the kind of things that good men don't understand. good men don't understand how often that crap happens because they're good men.
It's a compromising scene for her.
Yeah.
Jack Kennedy is surrounded by all of his servants, so to speak, his government, and she comes in, and I think they've had a relationship.
Seems to be.
It seems to be.
Yeah.
And she expected more than being, than having him service him, having her service him.
Yeah.
In a most degrading way. The Kennedys are not happy with that scene, as
I
you
bet
might
you they're
well
not.
imagine.
Well, too damn bad. Because if it wasn't her, he did it with his wife. I mean,
Oh,
I have no doubt.
I know.
I mean, those kind of men are those kind of men.
Yeah,
And we all know who they are. At least
Yeah.
all women do.
and it's hard to think of Bobby Kennedy in the same way. Whereas both of them having a relationship with her.
Well, I've read enough about their father that it's not a
Oh,
huge surprise.
Yeah, here we go again.
That acorn was right next to that tree. I mean, that's what they were taught. That's how they were taught to be men.
I know,
That's
Mindy.
how they were taught
I
to
was
be men.
saying, I don't know how anybody coming out of this movie would want to be a parent.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're even heroic movies lately
Yep.
are tracing so much, are searching so much for their childhood and for their parents.
Yep.
And the good thing about this is it shows you. Now maybe, for me, maybe too much, for you enough, because you actually deal with this on a daily basis much better than I do. But the whole first segment of the film is so depressing.
Yes, it is.
And her relationship with her mom,
It's horrifying.
and
It's horrifying.
yeah,
It's unbelievably common.
yeah. And I lament the fact that we don't get a little bit more into the insides of her working as that iconic actress.
The only thing I say about that is I did not look at this movie as being about Marilyn Monroe.
And you're right.
I looked at this about being a woman trying to get through life, her system, whatever way she did. The point of it being Marilyn Monroe to me was just, it was a recognizable person, but not her. I mean, I know all the controversy around it and stuff. I'm a big believer in art is art. Go ahead and hate it, but let's all produce it. So I didn't think this had to be made by a woman or it had to be made by a blonde woman or whatever. Because, I mean in the most loving way possible, being her was irrelevant. She just was an iconic representation to me of what so many women lived with before and now.
All right, Mindy Mcfann, we have to send our fans to to our podcast.
Yes, I do.
Back Talk,
Go for
which is going to extend our conversation on this. And your recommendation for the film?
All women will be triggered by this movie. Know that ahead of time.